so been looking forward to today's interview. I'd like you to meet Ashlynn Mitchell. Ashlynn is a beautiful mom of 2 girls. She lives in Orem, Utah, and she's actually from St. George, Utah. She had a successful design career as a kitchen designer after graduating in interior design from SUU. And then she had kids and decided to be done. She's been married to Colby for almost 18 years, and they renewed their vows 2 years ago, which I saw the pictures of that and thought that was so cute. She currently runs Mama Bear Fitness and Ashlynn and Colby, and is a co-host on their podcast, Betrayed, Addicted, and Expert. So thank you so much, Ashlynn, for being willing to meet with me today and share your story and what you've learned with these ladies. I think it's so valuable. What you're doing is just amazing.
Oh, well, thank you for asking me.
You are welcome. So first of all, when I had one of my ladies in my group that told me about you. She said, you need to go follow Mama Bear Fitness is what it was. And when I got on and started looking at yours and your husband's story, I was so inspired. As you may know, I work with women, helping them strengthen their marriage. I have a 10-week program that I take them through, and everybody has their skeletons in the closet, right?
Totally.
So I started finding even more so how much people are struggling. And so as I watched your story and how upfront and real you have been, it was so inspiring, so hopeful. Your story is so full of hope. So thank you for that first. And then second, would you mind sharing your story with the ladies, how you got to where you're at today?
Sure. I have to start out by saying we have this mutual friend who probably sees me as like, who the heck is she now? Because I never told her. I never told anyone my story. And so to say I'm so upfront and bold now is almost laughable, because I was so isolated and alone in it for so long. I was too ashamed to tell anyone. So Kobe and I got married almost 18 years ago. I didn't know any of his history with pornography and what his promiscuous lifestyle, whatever. And we just figured we'd get married and that everything would go away if we had issues. We had pretty high expectations, I'd say, for marriage, and very different expectations. And so that first week, when we got home from our honeymoon, we knew something was off. Like, we were already disconnected.
Wow.
Yeah. In the first week. And it was because we moved into a really tiny apartment. We were still in college. And as much as we were in tight quarters, we were very much apart. He was still living this secret lifestyle. Staying up late. I would go to bed. He would stay up. He would watch things or whatever he wanted to do. And I didn't want to know. I knew something was going on, but I also didn't want to catch him doing anything. That went on for years. We finally reached out to, when I did actually catch him, and reached out to our religious leader, and just said, we need help. And they didn't know how to help, besides saying, Kobe probably wouldn't look at pornography and masturbate if you just would have more sex, right? And you guys, that's not the answer.
Yeah.
The ironic thing is, if you find anyone with a similar story to mine, you'll find that a lot of them are having a healthy sex life, a sexy health life.
Yeah.
It's fairly healthy, because we had a very nice marriage, except for this like really yucky, disconnected part. But everything else really worked. We functioned, we had fun together, but we couldn't talk about anything hard that had anything to do with that. So we started seeing a sex therapist, because we thought that was the problem. It must be our sex life that's causing these problems, even though his problem started when he was 7 years old. That didn't make any sense. So we tried it. She told me from, I think we went to 3 sessions. At the end of the 3rd, she said, Ashlynn, you don't need to come back. You don't have any work to do, which was a lie. And she told Kobe to go to 12-step program. She said, you are an addict and you need to get help, and I can't help you. And so there was some good that came from that. Kobe started going to 12-step, and that word addict was placed in his head. Really bad for me, because I really just pulled back and I said, you fix this. And the idea of like pray it away, and that was like in full force, and it didn't work. So let's see, we had been married 6 years. We had no kids. We just both worked full-time careers. Things looked really great on the outside. And he had an emotional affair at work, and our bishop, our religious leader, called us in because he had been called by the other spouse. And so it was kind of like, you got caught by someone else kind of thing, and was absolutely heartbreaking for me. And I didn't totally understand why, because there was no physical touch. They weren't together even in that way. It was all over email, over text, and over the phone. And so I couldn't understand why I was so upset, but I was. And I feel like during that time, we did try to see another therapist. Again, not much help. But I feel like that was a time when, for me, I think God really placed this, like, his arms around me and just said, like, I'm going to hold you until you can figure things out. Like, I'm going to keep you protected, because I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand those mixed emotions in my head, and I didn't understand what was going on with my husband. And so I think he just kind of kept me afloat during that time. And there's really no other way I can explain it, because otherwise it's like, well, why didn't you just leave? Your marriage was pretty crappy at that point. That was why I held on. And that we started having kids, and that, the topic never really came up. Kobe traveled a lot for work overseas, and he would be gone for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. FaceTime, Zoom, this wasn't a thing back then. And so we would talk a little bit, because it was expensive. And there was never full truth there. It was like, we knew that traveling was really hard on him because he was alone. He was in countries that sex was very normalized. And so it was a scary thing for me, and it was scary for him. And so we just didn't really talk about it in depth, because neither of us wanted to deal with it. So let's see, it was a 6-year gap between the first emotional affair and then the second affair. We'd moved to Utah. He's gotten a new job. His job was great. He was still traveling though, and he was he was mentoring a lot of women, and they were beautiful women. And so it was really hard for me. He would get tagged on Facebook, and all the people in our neighborhood say, wow, what do you do for work? I want to get your job. You're always tagged by these beautiful women. And he's like, yeah, ha, ha, ha. And I'm over there going, if you only knew.
Right?
Yeah, not that great. So we had started going to therapy again when we moved to Utah. And really, we'd found this family therapist who we felt like she was really helping us. We were trying to we had the same fights over and over, which I'm sure people can relate to.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, it's not working. You're having the same fight over and over and over. So we tried to get some help. The problem was I was very disconnected from who I was and what I was feeling. I'd numbed out. I'd numbed out because that whole part of my life was too hard. And so I just was like, no, but this part's really good. So I'm going to live in here. I'm over here, not over there. So when she would ask me how I felt, I just sat in silence, and she didn't understand what was going on. And so I just didn't, it was kind of a waste of time. It was 18 months that we did that. And I think we went once a week. It was a lot that we did nothing. I think it kept us married, but we didn't like move forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then my daughters were sexually abused, and it was a huge blow to our family. We got them in specialized therapy, reported it as soon as we found out, and our lives really switched over to that. And I became that mama bear. That's where my company name came from, because I was like, I went to the library. I would check out like 15 books at a time. And I was just reading, like, how can I make sure my girls aren't affected like this for the rest of their lives? And what can I do to prevent this? And I just had this fire inside of me to gain that knowledge and to help my kids. And we'd put our own marriage on hold, like no more therapy, because we couldn't leave our girls with anyone. And so we were in group therapy as a family and doing that thing. And during that time, I remember my husband being he would never cry about it. And he was very upset, and very supportive, but never had emotion about it. And I remember the therapist saying, why haven't you cried about this, Kobe? It's a big deal. This is like a huge thing for your family and for your girls. And he wasn't sure. And later we found out, a year later, he told me he was having an affair during that time. He checked out. And the hard part about that, a lot of people who reach out to us will say, I had a baby, or I just lost my parent, or something traumatic had happened and their spouse had an affair during that time. And it's like, how could you, right? But now I look at it, hindsight's 2020. I can see he was so low, and it was like the perfect storm for him. He had nowhere. He felt like he had nowhere to go. I was over here doing the mom thing, like craziness. And so he went to someone else, and it was devastating. And I didn't know for a year. My friend, JC, she was a acquaintance from high school, shared on Facebook that she had this betrayal group for women who had been through trauma. And she was helping to spread the message of hope and recovery. And I was like, what does she know? I've told no one my story. And I messaged her on Facebook, and I was like, why are you asking me to like your page? What do you know? And she's like, I don't know anything. So I told her my story. For the first time in my life, I told someone what I had been through. And I went to her conference and learned about what betrayal trauma was. I learned about what addiction was, that sexual addiction is a real thing. And came home, told my husband. I jumped a little bit. This is the time he was having the affair. So I told him, I said, I think this is a real thing. I think you have addiction. I found Fight the New Drug and explained that, there's a science behind it. It's not a religious thing. Like, it's affecting your brain. It's affecting our relationship and the connections that you have. And let's see, that was in October. And in August, we started going into specialized therapy at Addo Recovery in Linden, Utah. And within 6 weeks, that's when he told me of that second affair. And our life kind of flipped from there. We really were both, we had an in-house separation and said, okay, we're gonna figure this out. But we really said, I'm gonna figure this out for me. Like, if we stay together or not, I'm gonna feel better. I'm gonna heal. I'm going to get through this, because if I stay with you or if I don't want to take this into another relationship. I want to be done. And so we really went into recovery to work on ourselves. And we're 3.5 years into recovery, and we're just now starting couples therapy.
Wow.
So, yeah, because we've just really focused on ourselves. We took about a year off from therapy and groups, and have just come back and said, okay, let's start working on the intimacy part, which definitely has to heal after something like this.
Yeah.
And it's been great. So we shared our story almost 2 years ago on Facebook on with no plan. We told our therapist that we would love to give them a referral because it changed our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, can we make a video instead? And we were like, I don't know. I said no, actually, but my husband is the one. He said, I want to share because he, of all people, thought he could never change.
Yeah.
He never saw that there was going to be hope to fix things, and he never planned on telling me about that second affair. So he just wanted people to know that you could.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave in, and we made these videos and shared them, and they were shared everywhere. And it's crazy. People still find those videos. We talked to a man last night in Iraq who said, we just found your videos this week, and we're realizing we need help, and what can we do? It's amazing. And we had no plan of what that would do, but to just share hope. And it's created this whole other part of our life where we get to help people all over the world.
Isn't that amazing? Absolutely amazing. And I know just my own little journey I've had. I look back now and I'm like, if I wouldn't have had those experiences, I wouldn't be where I'm at today and doing what I am doing now. Do you feel that? Do you not that you loved what you went through, but you wouldn't be where you are today without those experiences?
For sure. And to be honest, I mentioned it first, I was very isolated. I had a lot of friends. I've always been confident and things like that. But to be where I am today, where I love who I am, and I love the people who are in my life, that's a totally different feeling than the life I led before, where people drove me nuts. I judged everyone, because I didn't want to deal with my own stuff. So,
well, I want you to pass a message on to Colby for me.
Okay.
Thank you. Please tell him thank you. Because what you two have lived through is more common than we want to believe, right? It affects more marriages than we want to believe. And for him to be so willing to be so vulnerable, to allow himself to be out there and share his story and your story, and you being willing to support it and be that backbone of we're going to figure this out together, right? The ladies I work with, I hear a lot of personal stories and my heart hurts for them. And I just am so grateful for individuals like yourselves that are exposing it, opening it up, showing it, and showing that it's messy. It's actually kind of messy, right? When I listen to your podcast, it's not perfect. It's messy. You're maneuvering through, trying to figure out how, this is going to work. And it's so real. And like I said, when I introduced you, you bring hope to a place where I think a lot of people don't feel hope. So make sure you tell Colby, thank you so much. I think, it's huge what you two are doing. And I'm sorry about your daughters. I have 5 children. Can't even imagine what that would have been like for me.
Yeah, they're thankfully in a really good place. It's been 5 years, but they're strong.
Yeah. And I followed you just a little bit on your trip to Europe. Your daughters are darling. They are just the cutest thing. And when they're dancing, when you guys are working out, and I'm just like, this is so cool. This is so cool that you guys have brought it in as a family. I love it. It's awesome.
Well, thanks.
So there's 3 things that I kind of want to highlight and talk to you about. So I'm going to name off those 3 things, and then we'll go into them one by one. First, I want you to kind of educate us a little bit and talk to us a little bit on betrayal trauma. What is it? How have you figured out how to maneuver through it? And then the next one is going to be the power of me, and that's you recognizing there was work you needed to do, right? Like we saw when somebody else is the problem, no, it's their problem. They need to handle, and that was your first go-to, and then recognizing it in yourself. So that's the second one. And then I love, love, love your concept of the spike in your head. And so I want to talk about this and how detrimental you have found that spike to be. And I talk with women, that's a really big part of what I talk about with them is our self-talk is so important. So those are the three things I kind of want to highlight today. So first, betrayal trauma. What is it? You know, I mean, I'm sure a little bit of it's self-explanatory, but what is it? How did you figure out how to maneuver through it? And what advice do you have for women that are in your situation, but even earlier on, they haven't come out, they haven't got they don't know what to do. You know, how do they support their husbands? What steps do they take?
Okay. Oh, it's tricky. So betrayal trauma is actually, the symptoms are similar to PTSD. So post-traumatic stress syndrome. So, there's a range of symptoms that you can have. So like depression, weight gain, sickness, like autoimmune diseases, often pop up with things like this, anger, unexplained anger, the kind where you rage and then you leave the room and go, what did I just do? That was me. We call it the crazy making. And it kind of gets wrapped up in that spike narrative too, of just like the constant, like broken record of, okay, this is my fault. I'm not enough. I'm a terrible wife. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not skinny enough. I'm all these things, right? That it makes us crazy. And, you could have nightmares. I had nightmares and I still have, I haven't had a nightmare for probably over a year and a half. But yeah, it's those traumatic, reliving those things. So there's probably over 100 symptoms that you can have. But the most common that you'll hear is the anger. My husband is very outgoing and very likable guy. And I remember specifically his family saying, your wife is so mean. And he's so nice. Like, why are you married to her? She's so mean. And I remember, like, I can visually remember being at my in-laws' house and thinking, if they only knew, like, I know I'm not perfect and I know I am being mean, but I can't even understand what I'm feeling. Like, I couldn't express it. I didn't know how, except with rage and that anger and the name calling. And so that was a big deal for me to understand that, okay, that isn't me. And I can separate myself from that and I can change because I haven't always been that person and I don't like that person. So some of those are some of the symptoms. Deciding what to do with it is a big deal. And saying, I'm going to get help, whether or not my husband does or not. More often than not, it's one or the other. It's rare. Our story is kind of a rarity where both of us were on board at the same time. For a lot of our marriage, it was, he would say, hey, let's go to therapy. And I would resist. And then I would say, let's go. And he would resist. This was the first time that we found actual specialized therapy that was for betrayal trauma and sexual addiction. And so it wasn't like we were going to the doctor with a, back issue, going to our family doctor and saying, hey, I need to have back surgery. And they're saying, I don't know how to help you. I went to an orthopedic. I went to someone who could really help me. And that made all the difference. My husband felt safe when he went into adult recovery because he said, you know what? They've probably heard it all. Everything I'm going to tell them is going to not shock them. They're not going to look down upon me. He felt safe. And so I felt safe knowing that I was going into a place where for the first time in my life, I felt like I belonged. I wasn't the girl who had the crappy marriage next to the girl who looked like she had it all. And the craziest part is you walk in there and all these women are beautiful. It's not like, you know, and the men are good looking. Like, it's not like these guys are living in their basement at their mom's house in their underwear and they're losers. They're
Right?
professional, successful businessmen that struggle, and they're married to like these great women. And so I think, yeah, that was off topic, but yeah, I had a lot of preconceived notions of what it looked like to be an addict and to be cheated on. And so for me, finding help for betrayal trauma was a big deal. That absolutely changed my world, to get educated on what it was and how my brain was functioning, and then to get educated on how how his brain and everything was functioning. That was really the first steps for me into making change.
Awesome. And don't you feel that, something I say all the time, and they probably get annoyed with how often I say this, really knowledge is power.
Oh, yeah.
Right?